Hello and welcome to the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. I'll call this meeting to order. Can I get a roll call, please? Here.
Gribovich. Hartley. Henderson.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Moser.
Here.
Sorensen.
Here.
Stallmaker. Watkins.
Here. All right, our first order of business is a discussion or approval of the minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
So move to accept the minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right. For this meeting, we don't have any old or new business. The first order that we'll do is any public that would like to speak on an item that's not on the agenda tonight can come forward and speak at this time. Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to commission. And we'll move into a special order of business this evening, which is a presentation of the public review draft of the Parks Master Plan. And I believe Michelle will kick us off.
Thank you. We're excited to have HKGI here, Rita and Jody, to present to you about the Parks Master Plan and park dedication. HKGI has done over 40 parks plans, including the Parks Plan and Dedication for Johnson, Iowa, and they've also done a neighborhood plan for Clive, Iowa, and I'll let Jody take over.
All right, thank you, and thanks for having us today. I will be going over the Parks Master Plan part of the project, and then I'll pass it off to Rita, but we'll have some time for discussion in between our questions. But I'm Jody Rader. I'm with HKGI. I'm a landscape architect, and we are part of the consulting team that the city has hired to work on the Parks Master Plan. I'm going to give a little project overview, and then I'll mostly be walking through the draft plan that will be released to the public tomorrow for public review. As you probably know, the City of Cedar Falls is updating their master plan for Parks and Recreation System. The last update for a system plan in the city was done in 1996, and so it's a good time to really look at the full system and look at all the investments and kind of celebrate what's already been done, and also look to the future for the next 10 or 20 years of investments in parks and recreation. So this plan is going to focus and is focusing on inventory and analysis of the existing facilities, a review of recreation and program offerings, identification of future improvements to meet the needs of your residents today and into the future, accommodation of park growth areas, and also as part of the deliverables, we'll be working on development of a park dedication subdivision code. And that's what Rita will be describing after me. We started this project in October of 2024, and we are anticipated to be fully completed by the end of 2025. This is our work plan and schedule. As you can see, we are pretty far into the project. We started back in September, October of last year. We worked through issues and opportunities and needs. We've been working on community engagement throughout the duration of the project. I'm going to go over some of our results and takeaways from phase one, which was really over the winter and early spring of this year, and we're launching into phase two as of pretty much right now. We also worked through goal setting and evaluation, looked at programs and services, and right now we are in the draft and final plan stage. And then we'll also be working on plan implementation, which is primarily that subdivision ordinance. So as you know, community engagement has been a really big focus for this project. There's a project website that's hosted on the city's website. Anyone can go to it and learn about the project, and we've been posting updates as we go along. People can also sign up to be notified of project updates. And we've also had a really robust social media push thanks to city staff and communication staff. There's also been business cards, print media that have been distributed, podcast, radio advertisements, and Michelle, I think, were you also on television? Yes. So there's been a lot of outreach for the project over the last 9 months. During that first phase, we also administered a community survey that was open from November through January, and we received 1,300 responses to that survey, which is great for a community this size. We also have a social pinpoint site that's still available and will be open through the duration of the project, and this is an interactive map where people can provide comments on an online map and then also see comments that other people have said. And so we've gathered quite a bit of information about where people have concerns, ideas, and places that they really love in the city. We've also held a number of focus group meetings on different topics and had targeted invites to those meetings as well as being open to the public. The first one was on athletics and youth sports. The second was on playgrounds and inclusive play. Trails and natural areas was the third focus group. And then we had another group on trails, bike, and action sports, which was really focused around skate parks. And then today we also held a fifth focus group that invited members of the development community to talk about park dedication. As you also know, we have a really great steering committee, and some of you are on our steering committee, and I know we've got some members here as well. The steering committee is made up of 2 representatives from Parks and Rec Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, Bike and Ped Commission, and the Tourism Board. We've had 4 meetings over the course of the project so far. In the first one, we focused on kicking off the project, reviewing community engagement plan, and then we did a SWOT exercise, or strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. During our second meeting, we looked at trends and a needs analysis. The third meeting, we focused on vision, goals, and objectives. And our fourth meeting, which we held a few weeks ago, was reviewing projects and recommendations. So it's kind of following the chapters of the draft plan. And now I'm going to walk through the draft plan elements. So as of tomorrow, we will be releasing chapters 1 through 5 of the draft plan for the public review. We'll also be releasing a version for the steering committee to also provide comment on. And so similar to that interactive map, the public will be able to view the draft plan chapters and also make comments, and people will be able to see what those comments are. We'll also be inviting people to provide comments over email directly to staff. Chapter 6, which is implementation, will be drafted over the next month as we collect information from the community on priorities and understand a little bit more of the direction we're going with those draft projects. We'll be putting together that implementation chapter for the final draft, and we'll be shooting to have that adopted in September. And then the park dedication and subdivision ordinance will be worked on over October and November. Oh, it's being worked on right now, but that's when the hearings will be. So I'm going to walk through what's included in the draft plan. I'm not going to go over every single detail because it's a lengthy document, but I'm going to give you the highlights so that you kind of know what you're getting into as you take a look at it over the next few weeks. And I think I don't know if I mentioned it, but it will be available for viewing and commenting from tomorrow, the 10th, until August 18th. So in the introduction, we talk about the purpose of the plan. We also have a section on why planning for parks and recreation is important today. We talk about health and wellness, property values, the natural value and environmental benefits, and also cultural and social amenities that are tied to parks and park systems. We also have a section on community profile or demographics, looking at what is the makeup today of Cedar Falls and where do we see it going. Some of the highlights or takeaways is there's about 10% of your population who experience disabilities, and so that's something to really consider as we look at parks and think about accessibility in parks. Also, a pretty large percent of your population are walking and biking on a regular basis, either to work or school or to parks. And so I think that's something that we really focused on as well over the course of the planning process. We also have a very extensive relevant plan review. We looked at all of the planning documents that are relevant to your park system over the last 20 plus years, and we've called out some of the items within all of those plans that are kind of relevant and guiding as we look to the future. We also have a section on existing parks and park classifications, and the definitions of those classifications between community parks, which are your larger parks, something like Big Woods or Prairie Lakes Park. Those are your community parks. And then we've got a series of neighborhood parks within your system. Those are the smaller parks that are embedded within your residential areas. Mini parks are more like your plazas. And then specialty parks are things like your skate park, or some of those parks that have kind of like a single-use function. We also look at the floodplain buyout parcels that are part of your city and make up a large part of city-owned property. And we know that some of these properties are, actually most of them are being maintained by the park system or by the park staff, and so they are kind of an integral part of that as we look to the future. We also looked at your existing trail network as well as your future trail network as planned in your bike and ped plan. And then we also looked at your capital improvement program and analyzed where you are budgeting for the future for parks and recreation. Because you don't have a specific parks and recreation department that's submitting projects within one category, we took a look at all of the projects that are within your next 5-year CIP and try to pull out everything related to parks and recreation so we can understand where are things being budgeted for maintenance versus replacements versus capital improvements. Chapter 3 focuses on a needs assessment. So here we're really looking at trying to understand where are those big needs and gaps within your existing park system. Some of the big takeaways that we've listed kind of right at the beginning of this chapter. Real strong need for neighborhood park and trail development to keep pace with residential development in growing areas of your city. Need for athletic facilities to keep pace with sustained demand. Opportunities to leverage recent investments in your downtown to maybe support regional hospitality or tournaments that would draw regional visitors. A need for a transparent process or mechanism for businesses and special interest groups to donate funds for parks while maintaining balance and investments throughout your system. Real strong need for playground replacement or new play types at nearly all neighborhood park locations to address broken and out-of-date equipment. A need for regular low-cost trail maintenance across the whole system. A need for alternative maintenance approaches for city-owned properties to support resilient landscapes and support neighborhoods. A need for updated signage and accessible entrances and wayfinding at many existing parks and throughout your trail network. We also looked at trends in parks and recreation that apply to Cedar Falls, and these are trends that we're identifying within the region, within the state, and at a national level. And then we talk about kind of some of the supporting statistics within these trends and also how it might relate to the future of parks in Cedar Falls. We also conducted a peer review or a peer community review. We looked at similar sized cities that are maybe have similar characteristics to Cedar Falls and compared the facilities, the park facilities that those cities have and how they compare to Cedar Falls. So we looked at West Des Moines, Ames, Marion, Dubuque, Waterloo, and Urbana. And in this chart, might take a minute to kind of digest it, but the area or the boxes that have dark green, those are areas where a city has maybe more or the best or more like above average facilities. The boxes that are orange are places where there's a deficit as compared to the peer communities, and places that are the peach color are kind of on average. So if you look in the column for Cedar Falls, you can see that in general, for the number of parks that the city has, the number of parks per 10,000 people, park acreage, number of community parks, tot lots, special use parks. In general, the city of Cedar Falls is doing above average compared to these peer communities. We also looked at the National Recreation and Park Association survey. They do a survey every year of similar sized cities and collected a lot of national data, and then we looked at how that compares to Cedar Falls. And again, in most categories, Cedar Falls compared nationally is above average or far better than similar sized cities. Some places where there is a gap or maybe a deficit would be inclusive playgrounds and dog parks. And also, they call them rectangular fields. These are multi-use grass fields, so something that you could play soccer on or lacrosse or rugby. We also looked at the service areas. So where do you have neighborhood or community parks today, and drew a half-mile and quarter-mile radius around these areas, and where are some of those gaps in service areas. One of the goals identified is to have a park within a half-mile of where everyone in the city lives. And so this map is showing kind of your coverage, which is generally pretty good, but there are some gaps in your existing neighborhoods. And then we also looked at community input. We gathered quite a bit of community input that I described earlier. We had 1,300 responses to the community survey, which is great. It was a very exact number. And we asked people how often they visit parks, what are their favorite activities, how do they typically get to parks. Oh. We also asked about trails, what kind of surfaces that people prefer. And we also asked a number of open-ended questions to kind of understand what are some of those qualitative items that we might be missing. This is a little snapshot of the interactive map that I described earlier. We received, as of yesterday, 676 visitors, and they've left 184 comments. Chapter 4 outlines the vision and goals. So we've developed a vision for parks in Cedar Falls. Looking to the future, we've drafted that Cedar Falls will continue to support and build a park system that is well-maintained, collaborative, adaptable, attractive, diverse, accessible, supportive, sustainably funded, and resilient. We also developed a series of goals and then objectives tied to each of those goals. The goals are kind of the larger where we want to be in the future, and then we've listed out objectives under each of these goals for some of the steps to take to reach those goals. So within neighborhood parks and play areas, we're really focusing on that half-mile walk distance, ensuring neighborhood parks are accessible, and also focusing on replacement of dated and old equipment. Within the trail network, some of those goals are continuing to create a world-class recreational trail network. We recognize that trails are really important in Cedar Falls, and it's something that you really hang your hat on and really advertise and market in the city, and that's something that should really be continued. There's also some gaps in your network that should be focused on completing, and also looking at how to prioritize trail connections to developing areas of the city and also address accessibility. We also looked at recreation programming, some of those gaps in your existing system, and also supporting some of those things that you're already doing. Operations, maintenance, and staffing. We've got a number of goals here about providing leadership and staffing to meet the needs of your park system into the future, maintaining and operating the park system to be sustainable and resilient, especially with consideration for wildlife habitat, water, and ecological function, something we heard a lot about through community engagement. And also looking at continuing to prioritize maintenance of equipment and facilities throughout your system. We also have goals related to access, signage, and communication. And within this area, we also outline some of the objectives about engaging with communities and neighborhoods as you look to develop new parks or look to improve your existing parks. And then finally, we have goals on partnership, funding, and stewardship. And a lot of these are about continuing to build those relationships and strengthen those into the future. So in Chapter 5, we dive into some of the big projects and recommendations that we are making for the future investments in your park system. The chapter starts out with big ideas and initiatives, and we've identified a handful of these bigger projects that might be multi-year or take a longer time to invest in and plan, but that have kind of risen to the top from what we've heard so far from the community as priorities. And so the first one is really focusing on completing that recreational trail network. And building off of your 2022 bike and ped plan, we've identified a number of gaps in your system that we would recommend that the city prioritize for filling in order to make some of those existing trails longer and complete some of those trail loops that people really enjoy and depend on for transportation and recreation in your city. The second big idea is to look at skate and action sports park. Today you've got the BMX park in North Cedar Falls and you've got the skate park next door to the junior high, both of which have pluses and minuses today. We heard a lot about a need for a skate park that can hold events and can be a place for community gathering, and also about kind of specific features that would draw more people in and kind of enhance the sport. And so this big idea focuses on either expanding and renovating your existing location for a skate park or looking for a new location to build a kind of bigger facility that can provide amenity for more age groups. Also looking at renovation of Roger Birdsall Memorial Park. We know that this is something that's been a priority for a while, but maybe not has been funded. And so we really think that this should rise to the top because there is a really growing and sustained interest in ball sports in Cedar Falls. Also, similarly, the Recreation Center renovation and expansion. This was something that was studied in 2019 and recommended, and the city has made some steps to move this forward, although it's a big project and it needs actual funding and backing to make that happen. And in the meantime, the demand for the facilities there has only grown. We've also identified specific neighborhood park and playground reinvestments that we think are priorities, but we're open to kind of understanding where the community sits. In short, almost all of your playgrounds today need to be replaced, and they probably needed to be replaced a few years ago. And so we're looking at kind of how to strategize replacements of those playgrounds over the next few years so that you can continue to provide high quality and safe facilities for your community and their neighborhoods. And then we've got other park priority reinvestments that we've listed out. A lot of these projects were identified in previous CIPs, or they were identified through community engagement or through discussions with staff. And so we've pulled all those together and listed them out and provided some additional recommendations there. And then finally, as part of this chapter, we've identified future park search areas. So returning back to that level of service map, we've called out some of those gaps that we identified in your neighborhood park system. And we've kind of called them out and then discussed what some of those potential park amenities or future park developments would make sense in those areas and provided some recommendations there. And we've also provided a list of amenities that we think are probably the most needed or would be most recommended for those new park developments. So next steps. Like I said, we're kind of launching that second phase of community engagement today. Today we had a focus group on the future development. Today we're presenting to you as the Planning and Zoning Commission. Tomorrow we'll be presenting to the Parks and Recreation Commission. And then also tomorrow we'll be launching the public draft of those chapters 1 through 5 for community comment. There will be an open house here next week on Thursday from 4 to 7 p.m., which we hope to see some of you there. There'll also be a pop-up at the farmers market on the 19th. And then over July and August, staff will be also providing presentations to community organizations. So with that, I will maybe pause for questions before handing it over to Rita to talk more about park dedication.
So, do you have any type of estimation of dollars to do all this?
That's a great question. So as part of that implementation chapter, we'll be putting together kind of a finalized project list, and then we'll be attaching high-level cost estimates to some of those bigger projects. But until we have I think a clearer idea from feedback from community engagement over the next month, it's a little hard to put dollars to some of those projects because they'll probably change, but that will be part of the final plan.
I would say it looks good. Nice work. Thank you.
You haven't even seen it yet.
I just have one question. Has there been discussions or priorities about parks that you people can use during the winter?
Oh, yes. We have talked about winter recreation, and one of the recommendations or potential projects would be to look at skating facilities at Gateway Park. But it is something that we also identified as a potential need within the city because there's not very many opportunities for winter recreation. And so we do have some ideas that are within the plan for that. But there's not a specific like winter park recommendation. It's becoming more challenging to kind of plan larger facilities for winter activities when winter is such a variable temperature these days. So. Well, go ahead.
No.
I will pass this off to Rita, and then we can obviously come back to any questions on the master plan. But thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing your comments on the plan.
All right, good evening. I'm Rita Trapp. I also work with HKGI. I am actually a planner by training, so I provide planning services to communities, particularly on zoning and subdivision code updates, comprehensive planning, just general development review. So I was brought into this project specifically to talk about park dedication because that's something that I specialize in with the communities that we work with. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about park dedication, just providing an overview, and then talking about potential ordinance components that we are working with staff to develop. I'm going to use that. It's not responding. All right. It's not moving forward. There it is. Okay, I'm faster than the PowerPoint. I'll have to slow down. Park dedication is something that is allowed by statute. Communities across Iowa do have that. I'll talk a little bit about what you have today, but the allowance in statute is that cities can require a reasonable portion of buildable land to be dedicated to the public or preserved for future use. Generally, it's tied to the subdivision of land, so that is the action that happens that allows cities to have that dedication occur. Dedication needs to be tied to new growth, so it's not about dedicating land to serve existing residents in the community. It's about making sure that it's a proportional impact. So as so many new residents are added to the community, those residents have a need for parks, and we don't necessarily rely always on the existing system to serve them. We will need additional parks into the system. We do want those additional resources to be near where the new growth is occurring, and that'll be part of what I talk about in a few slides. I do like to always make this statement that it is not expected that park dedication will fully fund all of the needs of the community. It's just not possible given the costs for development of new parks, but it is a tool in the toolbox for the city and something that the city has been talking about wanting to have, and so it was specifically included in this process to make sure that when we end our project that we do have a draft that can be considered for adoption by the city. As I said, there are limited state rules or guidance. There's really one place in state statute that references it. We're not going to talk through that, but it's not that there's a lot of detail on this. And so what we use is there was a case that provided some guidance, and then also looking at other cities and what they have in their codes, because those obviously have been tested as those communities develop. So we gathered precedents from a number of communities in order to identify how we might structure a park dedication ordinance for Cedar Falls. In terms of your existing code, there's kind of three areas in your existing code that reference something related to park dedication. One is in the improvement section of the subdivision code, where it specifically requires the installation of improvements identified in the subdivision chapter, but it's generally including sidewalks, walkways, and trails, so it doesn't specifically talk about parks. In section 20-6, it does talk about minimum standards for the design of subdivision. Does specifically state that all subdivisions should make sure that neighborhood park and open space needs are met. And then the third one is in the Parks and Recreation section. It does say that if there is a plan that talks about this, that the council may require the dedication or reservation. In none of these areas is there a specific formula that says how much land would be dedicated. There's not really a process identified. So some of the elements that we are looking at is to try and put all of the information about dedication in one location and identify what the process that the city would use. Currently, as a kind of reference, there's no actual formula dedication. So the city negotiates on each case on a case-by-case basis about what type of development dedication would occur, what that looks like. And that really is challenging. At times, city staff and the council really have to negotiate getting good land in order to have park systems. So that's another issue that we're planning on addressing through this code is what land is considered suitable for development itself. And then this kind of establishment of parks dedication will allow some consistency. It also will be helpful for developers so that they know coming into the community what the expectation is. Sometimes it's really difficult when you don't have something. While the flexibility is always requested, the not knowing is also challenging as well. The being unsure doesn't help with the financing element of it. We did have a developer stakeholder meeting. I'm actually going to come back and talk about that in a second. I want to go through the ordinance sections and then come back and talk about what they talked about. So the kind of 5 areas that we want to talk about are in the ordinance itself when we develop it will be the purpose, applicability, land suitability, the dedication requirement formula, and procedures. And I will just briefly at a high level walk through. Part of the intention this evening is that by having this introduction, then when we actually have the code, you're a little bit familiar with what to expect, what will be included. It'll be a little easier to review because it will be a number of different sections that we'll be proposing to add to the subdivision code. Generally, in terms of the purpose, we're looking at ensuring that the land is located and preserved for public park and recreational purposes to serve the needs of residents. As with many of our codes, we're really referencing the idea of health, safety, welfare of future residents. By having this, we are ensuring those types of kind of police powers that we have granted to cities through state statute. In terms of applicability, when park dedication is required, this will be in the subdivision code. Generally, it will be required when residential subdivision or plat occurs. Dedication would be also required if, for example, they originally platted a piece of property for commercial and industrial purposes and then at a future date decided that that wasn't the appropriate use and they wanted to then use residential. We would want to make sure that we capture that and make sure that we have dedication for those purposes. Staff and ourselves are talking a little bit about what happens when there isn't a subdivision or plat. Should we be collecting it? How might we collect it? Generally, those are kind of the technical details we're working out right now, but we know in general it will be through the subdivision platting process. One important element that we do want to include in this ordinance has to do with land suitability, making sure that everybody's understanding what might we want to have land dedicated, what is considered appropriate land. Oftentimes the staff or the council is negotiating exactly which land as part of a subdivision you might receive, and so we want to make that a little bit clear. Some elements, basic elements, is that we want it to conform with the park's master plan and the comprehensive plan. So if we show a park in this general vicinity, then that's really where our focus is going to be, not on the other side. And so that is helpful to provide because we are trying to find that half-mile radius. So we don't want the parks too close together because that's not meeting your goals of having the parks reach all residents. We are discussing the minimum size. I think right now the city has been getting smaller parks at times, and so the idea of through this parks master planning process, we've been discussing what is an appropriate size for a neighborhood park, how much land is that, and so that's something that we want to include in the ordinance to try and make sure that you're getting adequate size. Having a community full of very small parks is very difficult in terms of getting a variety of amenities. It's difficult for operations and maintenance every time. The folks that mow the lawn have to pack up the lawnmower, drive to a new location, unpack it. That's that inefficiency. And so if there are ways to have fewer but larger parks that still provide that service, that's generally what we're looking for through park dedication. We also are concerned as terms of placement, making sure that you can see the park from the street, that it's not hidden behind all the houses, so it really doesn't feel like a public park, making sure that it's connected to the existing park and trail system. That really supports the idea of the half-mile radius, because people can go to different parks in their neighborhood because they can reach them by parks and trails. So those are things that we would be establishing as part of the land suitability part of the ordinance. We also want to prioritize significant natural areas. And I say that meaning if there are beautiful places in a subdivision or in a neighborhood, we do want to preserve those. Saying that, we also want to recognize that some of those beautiful areas are not really realistic for placing, for example, a playground. You need it to be flat, and if it's all full of trees, that's difficult to do. So we want to prioritize them, but also recognize what we will give credit for and not get credit for. So floodplain, waterways, slopes, those things you might take as part of the dedication, but in order to meet their requirement, it wouldn't count towards that dedication. And then no credit for private amenities. So something that they want to do because it benefits the subdivision, but the general public isn't allowed, a clubhouse, for example, private pickleball court, tennis court. Those things we are recommending that no credit be given for those because they won't be available to the general public. In terms of dedication, the ways to dedicate, for sure, we'll be looking at land dedication and cash in lieu. Some cities have some other alternative proposed by a developer and approved by the city. That's that flexibility requirement. We are doing some research into how that's been working in other communities, so that may or may not be a part of it. Flexibility is great, but it also leads to negotiations. Sometimes it's challenging. So I have some calls out to some other cities that have that. There's a handful that do and a handful that don't, so that's something we'll figure out. But generally, land dedication and cash in lieu are the two primary tools that cities use for park dedication. Oftentimes, a developer will combine multiple strategies. They don't want to dedicate all their prime land for dedication, so they might give some cash and some land, or the idea of giving some land and the cash can help actually build the improvements in the park. So it's oftentimes that multiple strategies might be used. The biggest thing that we want to come out of this process with is an actual formula. Something that is clear, it's simple, that can be applied. Folks, for example, if a developer is just thinking about a project, they can easily do a calculation and estimate at least what they might be doing. That really helps in terms of understanding. Generally, we recommend using a formula that's based on the number of acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. This is a number that we're working on with staff. We are using a variety of different tools to kind of look at that. One metric is that the city has about 20 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents today, but that's including all the parks in the system, and so that's something we're having conversations with staff on the technical level. Is it all parks? Is it just neighborhood parks? Is it neighborhood parks plus mini parks? But we're looking at those. But the formula would be based on what is your vision for how many acres of parkland should be available for residents for this purpose. And then we look at persons per household by housing type, so using census information to really understand how many people are in each household. So if you build a subdivision of single-family homes, we can estimate how many people that are and make sure that we're providing the amount of parkland. So generally, it's required amount of parkland per person, which is set through the master planning process, times the number of units that someone proposes, times the persons per household. So if it's single family, I'm just making these numbers up, it's 2.9 people per household. If it's townhouses, it's 2.4. So again, they know going in, they can do the math, and they at least have a starting point for the conversation. So this is an example that kind of walks you through this again. An example, we haven't worked through all of these technical numbers yet. We've been waiting for the park plan to be done because you can't really work on the formula until the park plan has finished its assessment of what are the needs today and what are you looking for in the future, and we're just at that part. So you can see in this formula, you take the density, the units per acre of a development, times the total acres in the development, 300 units. The formula would say we required 0.007 parkland acres per person, times the persons per household, and so that development in this case would need to dedicate 6 acres. That's what we're aiming for, is something that you can just plug in your numbers, and it's clear for the city and it's clear for the developers how it would be approached. Payment in lieu is a possibility. There was case law that provided some structure to it. Park dedication is not authorized as a special assessment, so it is something that needs to be done through this park dedication process, but you can't do it as a special assessment separately. And any payment in lieu must be the developer's choice, so it's not something the city can require. So it's something that the city would have conversations with the developer about. What we need to do is have it based on fair market value of the acres that would have been dedicated, so that's something that's established as part of the platting process. And it must be used for park and recreation amenities serving the development. So we can't have park dedication payment for the east side of town to serve, and then the money is used for a park on the west side of town. So that's one element that we're working with staff. Again, the similar idea of we needed to have the park plan finished so we knew kind of how those park areas would be served. And so there'll be more definition in the actual ordinance. Procedures, currently, there aren't specific procedures that explain park dedication, so we will be adding some clarity relative to how that moves through. Generally, during the plat process, you would have the applicant work with the city to determine what would be dedicated, and then the actual dedication is completed during the final platting process. And so those are elements that will be established through the ordinance itself. We are also looking at the idea of including requirements about land preparation. So rather than just having raw land, that the developer has to do a minimum amount of preparation of that land before it hands it over to the city. So typical components that we see in the ordinances that we work on, that the utilities are there, that any of the streets that are going to go in are in, that it's seed and it stabilizes parkland, because it may or may not be built right away. It may be something that especially if it's on the edge of the development, you may see the land dedicated, and then you need the surrounding subdivisions to also develop to contribute their park dedication for the park to get built. So it's important that the land is in a good spot, that it can be what it needs to be as it's handed over to the city. So those are some of the elements that are proposed to be included in the requirement. I do want to walk back. These are kind of the ordinance components. But I do want to walk back to the meeting that we had today. We had a meeting with developers, a focus group meeting, and they were provided an introduction to the park plan as well as what we're thinking about for the park dedication ordinance. There was 5 attendees that represented developers and design professionals. Generally, the idea of a park dedication ordinance was well received. I think those that have worked with it have understood the fact that not having clarity is sometimes challenging. So the idea of having an actual ordinance and a formula is felt to be a good thing. The idea of allowing both land and cash dedication is favorable because sometimes it just doesn't make sense to build a park. So it's nice to have that option. There also, one of the individuals in particular thought the idea of having multiple subdivisions contribute so you could have a larger neighborhood park rather than a mini park in a bunch of different subdivisions was something that they were supportive of as well. So that's something that we need to think about and how that works in terms of procedures. A few of the concerns that came in that discussion. There is the potential for more costs to come at the beginning of the development process because we would require it at the final plat time. That is customary with all of the park dedication ordinances I work with, but I know that there's a concern. There's a lot of fees and a lot of preparation, a lot of infrastructure that goes in at the beginning. So there's just kind of that overarching concern about the solvency of the development when you have to do all of this at the beginning. There was a request for the city to consider allowing credit for private amenities because those amenities are serving the public, meaning the public in their subdivision. So that was a request for us to consider. There was a concern about just the general use of park dedication funds, that it happens in a timely manner and it happens to, that it will benefit the subdivision that contributed it. And that's just a general concern, I think, anytime you have a development where you're paying in and you have to rely on someone else to actually implement. It's challenging for developers when they build a subdivision and then the park isn't there for a number of years after those first homes are built. So I think we can all understand why that concern is there. There was a request to balance clear direction and flexibility to address unique situations. That is the challenge of code writing, is to try and be as clear as we can and as definitive as we can and allow some flexibility. So we'll do our best, but that is really challenging because as soon as that flexibility is available, then you're kind of back to negotiation and having those conversations every time. So we'll work with staff to try and figure out how to kind of thread that desire for that balance. And then just an overall comment, which I probably is not surprising. We hear this all the time about housing affordability. Park dedication is important. I think that was recognized by those that were attending, but they, just kind of went back to the conversation that it's not that the developer pays the park dedication fees. It ultimately is the property owners that pay for whatever is required of the city. So that comment was not made as we shouldn't do it, just like an overall comment of trying to make sure we're thoughtful about that in terms of how much is required, what is that requirement, and making sure it says what the city needs as opposed to maybe striving for too much. So I think that's a comment we hear right now a lot about housing affordability in general. So those were the concerns that we heard. Generally, I think it was favorable. Obviously, just everybody will benefit when they can see exactly what the code says. But it's good. I appreciated the opportunity to talk with folks so that we can work on the code with those thoughts in mind, and also so that when we explain the whys, we kind of know what people's thoughts were and what their concerns might be, because we will come back with an actual draft code. So our next steps, obviously, happy to answer any questions, but after this, we'll be working on preparing the draft code language. Staff and I have been working back and forth on that. We'll be meeting tomorrow again to kind of work through some of the technical details. And then in September, October, there's a consideration by you at a public hearing, and then obviously consideration by the City Council. So we'll be working through the process this fall with you, and we'll be presenting the ordinance, and we hope that today provided a good foundation. So when it comes back, you kind of have a good reason why we're doing it, kind of the elements and the things that we were thinking about, because there'll be details and technical information to review at that point. With that, I can answer any questions that there might be on park dedication.
Does anyone have any questions?
Question, but a common observation is that we do talk about affordable housing all the time, and I know you mentioned that a little bit, but we ultimately put all these extra expenses onto the developer and the contractors, that the land is expensive already, and now we're saying we don't want your bad land, we want the best land for the parks. And so it always, on one hand, we talk about trying to create affordable housing, and we do certain things. And then on the other hand, we come and we change things to make it harder for contractors and developers. That the city has used the contractors and developers to fund a lot of things over the years, and not stepped up and said, well, we'll buy those 2 acres or we'll buy those 3 acres, of land from the contractor or developer. And it's not just the 2 or 3 acres, it's the 1,000 foot of street they have to put in front of it that they can't build a house on now, but you still have to pay that street cost. It's still the same. So that would just be my comment on that.
All right, I hear you.
I wonder, do you have any data about property value near neighborhood parks or something like that? Like how?
In general, homes that are near parks or open spaces or anything of that nature have a higher property value.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was an actual, I know that's very broad when I say that, but if there was, that could be, if homes were typically sold at 10% more, that could be a selling point to developers in the community at large. If there was any actual data on that, that could be an interesting, because to your point and to the developer's point, they said that cost gets passed along to the homeowner, but if you're higher property value due to that,
The reality is, if the property owner doesn't, if the park is not paid for at the time of construction, the park is going to be paid for by the entire city through taxes. Like it's going to get paid for. And so kind of the question on park dedication historically has been, the folks that have already come through the community have already paid for the parks that are near them and their development. And so that's the reasoning why of collecting park dedication, is as new development happens and there's new needs, the new folks are contributing at the front end to their parks, and then they're part of the entire system. And then at some point, everybody else is also contributing to the parks. That's the theory behind park dedication in general, is that everybody's kind of paying as they come into the community for the parks that are nearby them. Because eventually, all of it does have to get paid for by public. It's not like if the homeowner doesn't pay for it, somebody else magically pays for it. It's all either taxes of existing residents or it's paid for by those residents. So I totally understand your comment, but that's kind of the theory behind park dedication and how the reason why it exists. Similar to streets, similar to all that infrastructure that's done at the front end, you need those things in order to have the development. And so having folks pay kind of as we go and build out a city rather than having the entire city pay for all of that infrastructure. And parks are not really different than streets, water, sewer, trails, all that stuff is infrastructure that serves those new neighborhoods. So it's just been somewhat disconnected. But I understand your comment, so respectfully, I know it's a challenge. It is definitely a challenge.
Well, I was just thinking about the spread of the cost, too. We also eliminate, every time we eliminate a house, we eliminate tax base, and we put it into land that generates no tax base.
But without that park system, you will not have people moving to your community.
Right.
So then you have no tax base so yes, you are right.
But it's not like we don't have any parks in the city.
Right.
Our numbers look very good about the parks that
But
we
if,
have,
yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, I know, it's one of those things. It kind of continues
balancing
on.
act.
So if you didn't put parks in this neighborhood, then people wouldn't move there. They would move to a different city where they could have parks in their neighborhood. So yes, you could drive a mile to a park, but people kind of want those nearby.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really tough situation because I think streets and water and sewer, people understand why they need to pay for those right away in order to just live, but parks are kind of the same thing. It's just we haven't talked about it that way, unfortunately. It's not seen as infrastructure in the same way as those others, but it really is infrastructure. It's just not talked about that way. Sorry. Park advocate,
I was just thinking that our favorite park is Big Woods, which doesn't really take away from the tax base because there's no buildable land around there, but it's not the prime land. It was, it was used as a borrow pit, basically.
We're not asking necessarily for prime land, but the reality is sometimes folks will want to give you land that is not flat, and it's very difficult to build a playground or a basketball court or anything if it's not flat. So we're not trying to get your prime. We're trying to
Need
get
sledding hills, too.
You can do part of that way, but people kind of expect a playground of some sort or a court or something that they can be active with. So you need some flat land. Otherwise, you can't really create something without a lot of effort. I do think, the comments are definitely, I understand, and it is a challenge as a planner because I want affordable housing. I want housing to be affordable, not affordable housing. I want housing that people can live in, but then these are the realities of also making great neighborhoods.
Yep.
So it's a challenge we all face.
I love how you allow multiple developers to kind of combine to make a larger park. How does that work with, do we develop a plan for that park and it's phased as the developments grow around it, keeping in mind, like, you mentioned like having that done in a timely manner to meet the people that live there now? Yeah,
it's not a straightforward linear answer. When communities do that, they have if you're totally a growing community, then you have a general sense of where you think the park would be, and then you kind of work through with the property owners on either dedication of a portion of it or the cash, and it's kind of looking through and working through those. It's a little challenging because you can't require the cash dedication, but it is certainly something that you have a conversation about. And I know staff is really interested in understanding kind of how, as growth happens, where parks would be and what those service areas are. So it's easier to do a bunch of mini parks with developers, but when you can, trying to put them together is definitely more successful for larger parks. And usually you're kind of looking at the crossroads of where those developments come together as opposed to putting it in the middle of a development. You're kind of looking at the edge of a bunch of them or two of them.
Corners.
So that, in theory, the nicest, wouldn't it be beautiful? It was all four corners, but we know it wouldn't be. You'd take pieces of all of that and kind of put them together. But it's not going to happen all of the time. It'll happen
Sure.
sometimes. But that kind of is a way to aim, especially depending on the size of your individual subdivisions. You know, we had one of the developers said that they only do like 10 to 12 lots. Well, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get mini parks from that. That'll have to be kind of pieced together. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That was one of my questions too, because I was wondering if a side effect of this could be that you have developers just do smaller subdivisions near each other, and then therefore it's.
Then they won't have to?
Yeah, or like, you break it up over, I know that's it seems like there's a legal way to kind of go around that a little.
Subdivisions.
But I get, in theory, your formula would cover that,
Well, and
But-
it's not that parks education hasn't been happening. It's that parks education has not been clearly stated on how you're going to do that, right? So the city's just been negotiating each time.
Yeah.
And so things will be different, but hopefully you already have a foundation for it. And that's why one of the technical elements with staff is to try and figure out how to get the formula kind of right-sized based on the goals and the vision of the parks plan, the reality of what's been happening. Because it's kind of a development process that has to happen for how that'll get put into place. But those are good. I mean, those are concerns. So I appreciate you mentioning them, because we need to think about all of those things as we try and write an ordinance.
From your background in Iowa, has any city gotten this right?
Gotten it right. I don't think I can answer that exactly. I know there are codes that we're looking at with precedents. I think it's different in different communities based on the level of growth that you're seeing and how much infill you're doing, so it's a difficult answer. It's one thing that you have is, as a community that's developed, there's going to be different challenges from infill and making sure we think about infill. I don't have a specific, all the codes they're similar, but there are nuances that we want to make sure that we tailor it to what your needs are, not necessarily. The precedents that we looked at, I think there's 6 of them that we've looked at, and then a couple of people mentioned some new ones that we'll probably go look at those just to see if there's other things that really make sense to fit for you. And that's what we do, is look at precedents and work with your staff to really tailor it to how you do your processes and what works for you and your developers. Because some communities are growing really, really fast. And so it's a whole different conversation with them on park dedication than maybe yours is, with meaning to think about infill and how it affects the development community. When you're growing really fast, like everybody's just knocking at your door, you don't have the same thoughts that have to happen as you're trying to support development.
I think it's really important that's emphasized, that we're really trying to tailor the ordinance to Cedar Falls and not just doing a cookie cutter from Ames or
No.
West Des Moines or what have you.
Yep, I can assure you we did not, because we brought up all the ordinances, and I know there's language that comes from different places, and then just based on our own experience in other places too. So that it's hard to do that for me, to just pull someone's ordinance and use it completely. And your staff has been a part of the process and is editing and bringing up points. So even if I did start with somebody's, it'll all be modified and improved based on their experience.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions from commission? All right, well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Oh, we want to go back through? We were just going to make sure for everybody, just to remind you of the opportunities. Just a second. Lots of opportunities to review the park plan, and so we really encourage folks to go online, attend the open house here at City Hall, go to the pop-up. We really want people's comments and feedback. That's what makes the plan your own and better, because you know your community, and so it's great to have those insights. So I'll just leave that up. Sorry, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that we reminded folks about those opportunities.
That's wonderful, thank you. And yeah, it'll be great to hear more about these presentations in the coming weeks, and for the public to have opportunities to engage and ask questions and leave comments. So thank you for highlighting that. That brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening, but are there any commission updates?
I don't have anything for you tonight.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that said, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening.